So Dr. Chris Marquis is the Samuel C. Johnson Professor and the Sustainable Global Enterprise at Cornell. He's the author of Better Business, How the B Corp Movement is Remaking Capitalism. And as Jessica mentioned, I'm using it with my class this semester. His research and writing is focused on how businesses are creating a more resilient and sustainable capitalism by focusing on the elusive triple bottom line of environmental, social, and financial performance. Before joining Cornell, Chris worked for 10 years at Harvard Business School, where he developed an award-winning course on social entrepreneurship. He's the author of more than 20 peer-reviewed academic articles and more than 50 Harvard business cases on topics related to sustainable business. He has earned awards for scholarly achievement from both the Academy of Management and the American Sociological Association. Dr. Marquis earned a PhD in sociology and business administration from the University of Michigan. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Marquis soon so he can share some of the key takeaways for his important and impactful work on how the B Corp movement is remaking capitalism. And after he's done speaking, I'll ask some follow-up questions of him. And then I'll ask some questions that came in during the event registration. And then we'll open it up for questions from participants here today, and Jessica and I will moderate those together. Again, I want to remind you a few Zoom etiquette things that Jessica already mentioned, but it doesn't help to overemphasize. Please keep yourself muted. And when it comes time for the Q&A, we'll use the chat feature. We invite you to keep your video on so that we all get to feel a sense of community together. But if in doing so, you have any backlit lighting or any fans or visible distractions, we'd ask for you to turn those off. And again, the event is being recorded. So if you're not comfortable with your video being in the recording, please leave your video off. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to be turning it over to Dr. Chris Marquis.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kristen, for the really great introduction. And thank you as well, and Jessica, Summer, DePaul, B Academics for having this event. I'm so sort of excited and passionate about my book. As an educator, when I was writing it, the core audience is really, for B Corps, general public, but a lot of it came out of my teaching work around B Corps, around some of the HBS case studies I've done. So I really put a lot of thinking as well into teaching it. So it's great to know B Academics, and all of you who have not yet joined B Academics, you should definitely join. So I'm going to go through relatively quickly. There's some documents that I have that some of you may already have seen. They've been circulated through the B Academics newsletter, but I'll also put them in the chat. So I've developed a teaching note that goes through in somewhat detail, chapter by chapter, discussion questions, different themes that the book can be used to teach for. There are 4 themes here that I mentioned, and I'll go through each of these in detail, or a little bit of detail. The most interesting part of this, I'm sure, will be the Q&A, so I'll try to go relatively quick. And I've also more recently done slides for all of the book. I've been teaching it in my own class, and so it was a good opportunity to put together slides. And also, I'm happy to circulate these to anyone. I'll also put a link to the Dropbox with them in the chat as well. And if you have improvements, updates, suggestions, please send those along as well. I know Kristen is one of the people who kindly sent along some thoughts and suggestions on the teaching note earlier. So I'll definitely incorporate those things and looking for feedback. Okay, so topic 1, generally, and this is the most sort of abstract in general, in some way, topic that I think the book can be used to teach on. What is the purpose of capitalism? What is the role of corporations? The backdrop of this, very much is this idea of shareholder primacy, that businesses, the primary responsibility they have is to deliver profits for their shareholders. This dates back to this sort of world famous Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman. He wrote an article in the New York Times Magazine in 1970. It was entitled "The Social Responsibility is to Increase Profits." This, interestingly enough, was really controversial at the time. It seems like sort of second nature now that businesses are going to be focused on profits, but actually before then, businesses, they had more generous pensions. they paid employees a much more sort of fair wage. I'm not saying the business was perfect at that time, but things like retirement benefits, employee ownership, stock ownership was much more popular, and that actually was a different type of capitalism that existed in the 19th century. And I guess the idea of the early part of the book is really situating this idea of the role of a corporation historically, and sort of how and why focusing on stakeholders is really important. Um, um, so yeah, so this idea of stakeholders that we talk about, many leading actors, from investors Larry Fink to this organization here, the U.S. Business Roundtable, have come to the conclusion recently that business is really too focused on profit, and this has led to a lot of significant issues. So, here are some examples of these. If you look at income inequality in the US and worldwide, it has just grown tremendously over the past number of decades. This can be directly tied to these ideas of shareholder primacy. If you look at when Milton Friedman was writing in 1970, the average CEO pay to worker pay was about 20 to 1. If you look more recently, it's 350, close to 400, in some years. And this is entirely a result of companies paying their senior executives based on share price. So if you can deliver quick share price, quarterly earnings, you can get massive pay. And so also pollution, as companies are really short-term focused, they're focused much less on things like long-term pollution abatement, et cetera. So, these leaders of the largest companies in America, the World Economic Forum, leading investors have said, we really need to reorient business much more fundamentally around stakeholders, and stakeholders being employees, communities, the environment, et cetera. But this is sort of easy to say, and a number of these companies have been criticized for the extent to which actually they do that. The second topic of the book is then actually trying to implement this idea of stakeholder capitalism, because really, if you think about it, it's easy to say we're going to be stakeholder driven. It's actually much harder to do it. And I think that this is where I think the content of the book can be particularly helpful for businesses. The institutions, things like laws, norms, culture are just very oriented around business focusing on a single stakeholder, being shareholders. To reorient around many stakeholders is much more challenging. So the the B Corp model provides a really robust set of processes and mechanisms for companies. If they decide to be B Corps, that's great. If they don't decide to be B Corps, these tools are actually really still useful. One is the B impact assessment, which I'll say a little bit about. It's sort of the y-axis, the up and down. The other is stakeholder governance. So whether a company becomes a benefit corporation or not, which is a new legal type of company, which a little bit over 10 years ago didn't even exist. These are companies that embedded within sort of in some ways the operating articles, the DNA of the company is a stakeholder mandate, which I'll say a little bit more about. So this idea of the impact assessment, I assume most people on the call sort of know about this, but just a little bit, 5 sections. This is a comprehensive assessment of a company, from governance, workers, customers, community, environment. You have to get 80 or above to pass. This very rigorous, very hard to do. There's about 3,500 to 3,700 B Corps right now, but over 100,000 companies use this assessment to actually understand companies' performance along these different dimensions. Here's an example of what this sort of can look like in practice. Patagonia is one of the highest scoring B Corps. That 151 is a really high number. You can see, things like environment, where Patagonia is well known for, scores very high. Their involvement in communities scores high. One of the things I think is important too is that they've grown over time. So you can see, the first B impact assessment they did in 2011, they got 107, and they've been increasing that, and now at this very high rate. So it's actually the last two, it didn't go up very much, but that's, I think, mainly because it's just a really high amount. So, a reason why I think over 100,000 companies are using this to actually manage their impact is that this is not just about social and environmental benefit. So many of the companies I've talked to said, we're a mission-oriented company. We got into this because, we wanted to actually, walk the talk, so to speak. We wanted to actually, be assessed on what we see as our core mission. But we came out of it actually as a better business. This is why I actually titled the book Better Business, because, it's not just, this using this B impact tool is not just about sort of assessing yourself around social and environmental governance. It's about actually, long-term risk management, implementing all kinds of appropriate policies and procedures to actually make the business run better. And this is why actually I think a lot of investors like Larry Fink are saying, we want companies to actually be assessed on these metrics because it actually shows that they're much better managed. This idea of benefit corporation statutes. So, on the one hand, you have the certification, the B Corp certification, which is run by the nonprofit B Lab. And then you have benefit corporation laws. So this is actually a legal type of company like a C Corp, LLC, and now there's a benefit corp, and it's passed in, this graph is a little bit old. It's actually, I think, about 38 states right now. A number of different countries around the world, from Italy to Colombia, Ecuador. I think Peru recently passed this. British Columbia and Canada is also passed this. So, companies there can actually, incorporate as benefit corporations, which sort of the key aspects of that are, within the articles of incorporation, a statement that the company exists for, delivering purpose beyond shareholders. And then also, very importantly, being accountable and transparent on that. Because again, sort of going back to the idea of the B impact assessment, actually measuring, tracking, performance on these aspects is hugely important to encourage long-term growth. So this idea of actually transitioning to stakeholder management, managing some key stakeholders is also, very important. And so I'll just go through a couple of those quickly. One is investors. There's been this massive shift of capital to social mission businesses. Impact investors, these are investors that put impact, social, environmental impact as part of their, investment thesis. But also, if you look in the past 7-8 years, mainstream investors have gotten into investing in B Corps. You can see here this table on the right. All the leading VC firms are investing in B Corps, and they're doing this because these companies are better managed, longer term risk, and also, they expect, I assume, to get an exit, which they've invested over $2 billion in B Corps, and these exits started to happen. When I first started teaching on this, the idea that public market investors would actually invest in these companies was, seemed fantastical or something. I'm not sure what the right word is, but sort of would not happen. And in the most recent half a year or so, there's been a lot of examples of this. Lemonade, online insurer, went public in the New York Stock Exchange in July. Vital Farms, pasture raised egg dairy company, also in July on NASDAQ. And most recently, actually just in February, App Harvest, which is an indoor farming company. They have a 60-acre indoor farm in Kentucky. Just went public in 2021. Martha Stewart, as you can see there, is actually an investor and on the board, and it's because of the quality of produce that they actually are able to produce through this system. Another really important set of stakeholders is employees. So many of the companies that I interviewed said, the big impact to our company is in the culture, retention, attraction of talent. Millennials and the war for talent is really intense today. And actually having a social mission and being able to show your social mission and being able to actually live your social mission and have employees be part of that on a day-to-day basis is huge, as many of these companies have related to me. And part of that is attracting. Many companies said, over 25% of the people who apply to their company on the application form, it says, why are you applying? And they say, it's because you're a B Corp. Another really important aspect is diversity and inclusion. So the B impact assessment is oriented around a number of different sort of, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion metrics. There's programs within being a B Corp to actually improve on this. I think this is a really important, obviously, incredibly salient, today, and something where the B Corp system has a robust set of metrics to help companies achieve that. Moving on to sort of, the future of the movement, I think, is only going to become more and more sort of, important. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I think it's something like where we're really at a tipping point in some of the important aspects there. It's a global movement. Over 50% of B Corps are outside the globe, or excuse me, outside the globe. They're outside the United States. I think Jessica in the opening mentioned there were 16 different countries represented. So, hopefully there's B Corps in all of those different countries, and it's why you're interested. Major companies, many major companies nowadays have a lot of B Corps as subsidiaries. Unilever is well known, Danone is well known, a number of other ones below. The UN SDGs is another hugely important global initiative. The 17 goals that the UN has set for humanity to advance on or solve in many cases, these are not things that are necessarily operationalized, so to speak, for business. So this B impact assessment, actually companies can see where they stack up against different SDGs and actually how to improve on those. So I think this is a hugely important aspect of how to actually work together on these topics. And then finally, I'm just going to say, SDG 12 is responsible consumption and production. I think this is, if you think about stakeholders, consumers are a tremendously important stakeholder. And this is something where I think is a real frontier topic. I think we've made a lot of progress on this. And I think that, many people say they want to buy from socially responsible companies, sustainable companies, but they don't know how to identify them. And I think this is where, the B logo comes in. I think being a B Corp is very important because, companies can actually, see that individuals can see that this is a company that stands by its social, environmental metrics and is transparent on it. So with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you all so much. Like I mentioned, I'll put some things in the chat as far as the teaching note and the slides, and always be in touch with me. Many of you on the call I've been in touch with over the years. I'm, looking forward to learning from you and your stories as you hopefully use the book and your students are engaged in it. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn off the screen sharing and we can do some Q&A.